Well, in today's session, during this clip, we will look into activities and task types. Well, we may say that a task or an activity is just like any building block that constitutes a lesson. But what is a task or an activity? We may look into this definition saying that, broadly speaking, it is any action or set of actions that students perform, which involves them using or working with language to attain some specific outcome or outcomes that may have different, let's say, origins. Now, thinking about outcomes or goals, having them always in mind whenever we plan activities, right? We may say that there may be, let's say, activities that seek to develop skills, and some others, well, learning sometimes entails doing activities that the students are not likely to meet in the real world. For example, if you ask students to insert some words in a text, it is clearly an activity which aims at getting a certain skill that perhaps has to do with grammar, vocabulary, right? So as to be used in a different context later on. And there we can mention those, let's say, activities or tasks that in a way resemble the real world. What do we mean by this? We mean that they may request the student to do something that they are likely to do in the real world. So they pose situations, right, in which the students will be actively using the language. Well, in simple terms, we can classify activities or tasks into three main categories. They are drills or mechanic activities, meaningful activities, or communicative ones. Now, thinking about a drill or a mechanical activity, they are those which generally have only one possible answer, right? And they do not take much, let's say, effort, or they do not involve more than one or two cognitive skills. That is of transferring, that is of replacing, that is of modifying, right? For example, in this case, we have an activity in which the students are requested to order sentences that, let's say, show the use of the present continuous. Well, when it comes to a meaningful task, when in a meaningful task, the students are requested to somehow manipulate language at a higher order, but again, the answers are still controlled. As you can see here, we have an example of an activity where the students are going to share information, right? And the prompts that we have here, we can see the questions, will lead them to, let's say, use a certain vocabulary area and a certain time reference. As you can see, that it might be the simple past, the past continuous. So the teacher can foresee the probable outcomes in terms of the output the students will be producing. In a communicative task, the students generally are the ones that decide on the output. That is to say, they may get prompts, it may be somehow framed within a situation, but the scope of the language that will be used is not easily predictable. And in fact, many incidental teaching happens out of this type of activities. In this case, the students will be working in pairs and they have to take turns to ask and answer questions about two different situations, right? Of course, we believe that in these situations, students will share some idea because they may belong to the same age group, but fortunately, people have different lives, and of course, they will be sharing experiences that have to do with this. So the response, let's say, that they will get will be somehow different. Coming back to the ideas of skill getting and skill using, here you have some instructions to different activities. For example, learners discuss and write some questions in order to make a questionnaire about people's eating habits. Then here we have a combination of skill getting and skill using, let's say, outcomes for the task. And in fact, it is a task that has two parts. So we can say that within a task, sometimes we have different activities or actions to be taken by the students. Then you have learners repeat a number of sentences you indicate to improve their pronunciation. Here, of course, the focus is on, let's say, getting the learners to speak better, to pronounce words more accurately, right? And perhaps if we have to think of skills here, it will be skills getting. But then that will lead on to a better, let's say, performance at communicating when they pronounce words well. Now, learners do a grammar exercise individually and then compare answers with each other. And here we can see that the outcome, right, or the goal within the activity may be at first sight a grammatical one. But in fact, comparing answers with each other is also being able to share and exchange views, right, and learn how to learn. Now, learners write a formal letter requesting information about a product. In this case, we are facing here a real-world task, right, which the students may encounter if they happen to, let's say, be in this situation in which they need to get more information on a, let's say, using a register that has to do more with formal or neutral English. It is important to highlight that traditionally, a lesson was regarded as a series of things a teacher does. But in fact, changes this paradigm, we have to think of, let's say, a different approach. We need to bear in mind that to make learning genuinely useful, we should think of a lesson as a coherent sequence of learner-targeted tasks, which by no means it is just including skill, let's say, skill using activities. In fact, part of the path of learning have to do with, right, has to do with, let's say, practicing language in skill getting activities. Well, even when language is being presented, have in mind what the students are supposed to be doing and what outcome or outcomes this activity or this task is leading to, right? We should not lose sight of this. Now, if we can take a look at this task here, at first sight, it may be a simple one, right? Any simple task can be used in a variety of ways. Even combinations are possible. For example, students think and then write answers on their own. That would be one of the actions they may do, but then that can be combined with pair work and discussion over what they have written. They may also, for example, prepare a short monologue statement of their own views on this, right, and then present it to the whole class. And why not? The teacher may ask them to write a short report on what they have done or the ideas they have, let's say, jotted down when doing the activity. In fact, we should consider that the outcomes and the objectives are the ones that drive the task. They are the dominant ones. Well, the teacher's options are always that of adapting the tasks. You may encounter thorough and clear guidelines on what to do with the task in a textbook, but you may decide to change the arrangement, for example, and make an activity become that one where there is pair work and you have changed it from a whole group task. That is to say, you will make those decisions. The textbook will provide you with the raw material, but you decide how it best suits your class and the moment it occurs in your lesson. These are some ways in which you can instruct the students to work, but that doesn't mean that they will work this way in the same task. It may be, as we said before, that there are different stages to perform a task that we may call them actions or activities. So there may be a stage in which the students have to do individual work, and then they move on to a whole class mingle where they have to look for information asking their partners. Or perhaps there is pair work and the students then later share together with the teacher with the whole class in the way of a plenary. Then the students, depending on the number of the class, they may work on small groups and the teacher moves around the classroom to monitor what they are doing, right? Or it may be the case that the students are working in large groups, such as when they are playing a game. As we said before, a task may take different sections or activities. Now, remember that before the lesson, be familiar with the material and the activity and prepare any materials or text that you may require. Now, try the activity yourself, decide on the best seating arrangement, estimate the time it may take you, and ask yourself how much language the learners will be using and if it will be worthwhile. Think how and what type of help they might require, what questions might they have, and what errors are likely to make. And considering this use of language and, let's say, setting up a plan and an action plan in terms of anticipating, right, the kind of work they will be doing. If it will be individual or it will, let's say, take the students moving around the classroom. As for the running of the activity, monitor the start of the activity and gradually set the students to work independently. Now remember that closing and rounding up ask the students, right, to be aware of the timing so that you avoid smooth or abrupt ends to it. And of course, most importantly, it is to give the students feedback. Give them correction if it is focused on form. That is to say, this is, let's say, the time when the students have a feeling on how they have performed, right? And it may, let's say, include feedback from their peers too. If you request peers to give them feedback too, it is a good way of fostering collaborative work. We will go into a deeper analysis of the activity roadmap in the following clip.